We're all good for that. There we go. I guess we will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball. Okay, welcome to the December 12th Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, everything to everyone. We have a pretty full agenda today, I think. Let's take a look at that first. Shall I share my screen, or who wants to? I can do that. Let me share my screen. First, let me find it. Not my screen.
I always love these Zoom meetings because you get to see inside. Dave, you have a very beautiful home.
Oh, thanks, guys. I don't pan down because you don't want to see the bottom. So. Bear with me for 1 second. Thought I had it here, but apparently I don't. Okay, now I can do it. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Oh, how about that?
Yes.
Miracles. Okay, the agenda includes scheduling a couple of upcoming meetings, review and discuss the current year-to-date budget, and take a first look at the budget that Sheena and the folks have prepared for the upcoming year. And if we get to it today, although I think we'll probably postpone most of the discussion, we'll talk a little bit further about new revenue streams. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda as written?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye, thank you. Okay, off we go. We seem to be, let's talk first about scheduling the next meeting or two. We seem to be a little off with occurring either just after or the day after now, in this case, the commissioners meeting. I'm wondering if we're better served, maybe not for the next one, but going forward, if we get our meeting organized so that we're before the commissioners meeting. That way, if we have anything that we'd like to bring up to the council, we can do that. Does that sound like a reasonable idea?
Absolutely. Makes all the sense in the world.
Without waiting another month to do that, right? And that sort of thing. But although I checked the calendar this morning, and I believe the commissioners meeting is set for, is it January 5th?
January 8th.
Friday at noon. I'm not sure that we can necessarily jump that one, but we may be able to beginning in the February meeting. So once again, in terms of the days of the week, our Friday afternoons, which have been our typical meeting days, our Friday afternoons running at around 3:30 or 4 o'clock, still good for people in general?
Sure. Every day is the same anymore.
Yeah, right. Indeed. Jill, how about you?
I'll say yes because I don't know, but sure, yes.
Okay. And since we don't necessarily want to keep the folks that are involved from town hall late in the day, how about if we shoot for 3:30 on Friday, January 5th and start the meeting then? And then for February, I think there is an opportunity here to go a week before.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
The commissioner meeting is January 8th.
I'm sorry, January 8th. That's right.
It's
That's what we're
Friday at noon.
Right. So we're still talking
So-
for the next one. I don't know that we can jump ahead of that, but maybe in the February one. So we're talking about January 8th at 3:30 p.m. for the next one.
So that would
And
be
then-
after the commissioner meeting, just to be clear.
Yeah, for
right?
that one,
Okay.
because I don't think we can push it up, much ahead of the commissioners meeting for January. But what I was going to suggest is that February, is it usually the second or the first Friday of the month for the commissioners meeting?
It is the 2nd, and let me look at February. It
That would be
is,
12. So we could go to the 5th and do it a week before. That's still, and we may want to squeeze in an extra meeting along the way because of, getting the budget together in time for the commissioners to receive and review it. How about if we shoot for Friday, February 5th at 3:30 PM? That
Sure.
sound okay to everybody?
Okay to me.
Okay. Tentatively, we'll check with the other folks that are not present at the moment, but we'll shoot for that. So Friday, January 8th and Friday, February 12th, 5th, sorry, at 3:30 PM. All right, that's a little more complicated than I had hoped for, but we're all good. Okay, next is to review and discuss the current year-to-date. Oh, you know what I missed? I missed the approval of the meeting minutes. There's a draft version of the meeting minutes out on the website that had some information added from Jill. Has anyone had a chance to review and have any comment on the meeting minutes from November?
None for me.
For comment, should I be reading what I added, or just, is it enough that it's sent out?
If you want to just describe, what you did or read it, you're welcome to, Jill.
Okay, especially because I don't think Bill was in that meeting. So, in part A, in the discussion of business, we talked about the current surplus and what it was due to, but one thing that wasn't in the minutes, it was also noted the only department which fell below budget projections was the building permits, which I added. And then in the section 3, in E, I added, or I changed that paragraph some to reflect some additional information. Basically, there was some discussion about possible reasons why that revenue was low, and some problem-solving, brainstorming ideas were brought up about possible, were the, it was shared that a few residents had experienced some issues with timeliness and response to the building permits during COVID, and asked if the building inspector might need additional help from Dewey Beach staff. Or it was noted to ask Jim if anyone had reported similar issues and what could be done to remedy this. And I put in parentheses, are the procedures forms as user-friendly as possible, given the importance of building permit revenue streams? So, are they still going through an email process? And there was some mention of the form being changed. So, is it as easy as possible for people to fill out? And that's my.
Okay. If anyone has any comments about the minutes from November, please feel free at this point. Otherwise, can I have a motion to accept the minutes as written here?
So moved.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you. All right, well, we're good with the minutes. Then we'll make those the final minutes for the November meeting. There's Joe. Hello, Joe. Welcome. You're on mute, Joe.
Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, one more share here. Sorry about your difficulty, Joe. Hope all is well.
All is well, thank you.
Good. We're just about to start into the review of the budget information. 1 second. Need to find that page here. I know I've got it. There we go. Let's start with the summary. I think that consistent with our last meeting, we all acknowledge that the transfer tax is the bucket that is, helping us meet and exceed our revenue projections for the year. And looking down, looks like we're fine in general on revenue side. We are, as we talked about before, up some on expenses for things related to COVID remediation and so forth. There's nothing there that's particularly new. I did have one question though, and that is, and I guess I would direct this to Sheena. We have if you look at the total fines line under revenue, it says the year-to-date budget is 81.7.
Yeah,
And
typo.
we far exceed that, but the total annual budget for fines is $347,000 apparently, which puts us at 40-some% of the budget. Can you check that one? Because it seems like we wouldn't be expecting another 100 or 200 and some $1,000 in fines in the last 4 months of the year.
Yeah, there was a typo. Gary caught it and I didn't get it out, having to work on the budget, Dave. The rest of the year-to-date budget for fines is down in the other income. Let me pull it up real quick.
But you're saying, Sheena, combined in the total revenue, we are at 314,576 versus 289,599.
Yeah, the year-to-date budget for total fines is 317,349. And so I put the number in the wrong spot.
Okay.
So we're only at 40, we only hit 40. We're not doing good. We're less than half of the year to date, and there's no way it's going to come in.
In the fines total.
Right.
Okay. Did we overestimate the fines drastically in this budget year? Does anyone know?
No. The fines includes parking tickets, which there was not enforcement on. We only had one employee out on the streets. And then the other rest of the fines is court fines, such as traffic tickets, ordinance, drunk and disorderly, that sort of thing.
Okay. All right. Well, there's not much to be done about that other than, consider the bucket for the upcoming year at this point. I think we're all in agreement that we're in good shape overall financially for this current fiscal year, and we're likely to end up in good shape largely because of transfer tax. But on the building permit stuff, can we do a little work? Shall I talk to Jim to see if we can do a little analysis? And I'm not personally familiar with the new building inspector, but should we ask Jim Dedes to have a look into that and see if there's a way that we can understand what the reasoning is for us being so low on the building permits, consistent with what Jill had suggested and added in the meeting minutes?
I talked to the building inspector yesterday. Yeah. She only has about 8 permit requests in as of right now. She's getting them out in a very timely manner.
I think we should have Jim check. What
Well-
is the process? What is the process for, because we're talking over a period of months.
Yeah, we have,
Jim
with
would
the,
appreciate any discussions about this. He would love to talk with anyone about it. Jill, he is waiting, would love to talk to you Monday morning. He told me that yesterday.
okay. If you want, Jill, you and I can both, talk with Jim about it, or you're welcome to talk to him
We can talk
one-on-one.
about it together. Yeah, that'd be good.
I just think, it's a good idea for us to dig in a little bit more, given that with the amount of real estate turnover in town, and Gary, I think you brought this up in yesterday's meeting, the part I listened to, about the amount of outstanding likely transfer tax that will be coming in based on your analysis. And, there should be some correspondence between transfer tax and building permits to some extent anyway. So let's at least.
Yeah, Dave, just to make a comment on that, I think Gary had in the commissioner meeting had pointed out that right now in Zillow, there's $28 million worth of property that's on the market. And so when you look at, what that will transfer into in terms of transfer into from a transfer tax, it's an issue. It's a good thing. I'd like for us to take a cautionary view at next year's budget. And it's just as a comment as the liaison, because I think Sheena, you commented we're over $1 million right now.
We are projected to be over $1 million for this year, yes.
Yeah, so it's we have very high transfer tax in the town in this fiscal year, and I'm not saying there's only so much transfer in a period of time, and I think COVID has increased the amount of transfer. I also believe that as you had pointed out, Dave, the total fines are down, and we should press upon the commissioners. I'm trying to put multiple hats on here. We did not put code enforcement back on the streets after they resigned due to COVID last year. And I really feel like that as a town, we need to make sure that we have more than enough code enforcement people. So just as a comment for next year, or else we're going to have the same issue that we have with fines.
Let's talk further about that, Bill. I hear you loud and clear. Let's talk further about that when we get into the upcoming budget, because I did have a chance to look at it at some length this morning, and I do have some thoughts and questions about that. I think that'll be some interesting discussion coming up here soon.
Yes, sir. Okay, sorry.
So on the expense side, I think there's no big surprises. We're still, well above our estimates for the year, even with having taken out the set-asides. Let me see if I can increase the font here a little bit so we can see. The differential total is, am I reading this correctly, is $55,000. We're to the good, and 96. Net from operations, we're at 289. What's the 96 in the red to the far right column? What we are year to date? Am I reading that? No, that's the annual budget. We should be minus 96, and we're up 289. So that's clear, right? Everybody got that?
Yes.
Okay, we're good for
We're still expecting some money from the state or somewhere for COVID reimbursement there were on the expense side, there were costs. I think Sheena had mentioned that last time we met.
We've received the first check from the CARES Act, 17,000+, that I took that directly to offset expenses, lowered them. I've talked to the chief. The FEMA money, which is about 35,000, is just going slow getting here. We should probably get one more check from the CARES Act this fiscal year, because I have to submit again in January, and then I think December and January is the last amount they're going to be giving.
That's good,
Okay.
though.
Any other questions about the current year-to-date budget? I think in general, we've been very fortunate. If you look at where we were back in, say, the March, April timeframe, when everything was looking fairly dire, and we did the belt tightening version of this, I think we're all pleased with the results, and that the town did get back to at least a semblance of normal through the season this year. All right. Anything else on the current year-to-date budget? All right. Now, on to the really fun part. Here is our budget estimate, fresh off the presses from Sheena. And I don't know if, since it was posted just, in the last day or so, we have, much of a chance to really review it. The time I spent looking at the allocations, which are over here. It's hard to get everything lined up on the screen here, but let me, if you don't mind me doing a little back and forth here with my cursor, I'll try to go back and forth, and we'll talk about some of the top line numbers here as a starting point. Sheena, do you want to give a couple introductory remarks about how you went about this, just to get us started?
I did give you my notes, correct? I was able to, thanks to Bill, he told me how I can print out all the notes, because almost every one of my cells on the spreadsheet has notes. And basically I just went through and, printed off everything that, where there was a change or a drastic change.
Okay.
It's very useful too.
And thanks for doing this.
Yep.
It's been,
Jeff, you did an awesome job. You really did.
Yeah.
Much more than Bill did. I understand.
No doubt.
I overwhelmed Bill
Thank
with
you.
spreadsheets
Thanks
upon
very much for helping out with this as well. Your help and guidance is always greatly appreciated. The first note I had in looking at this, let me just try to, do this as best we can, because I can't compress the columns here in the PDF document. The transfer tax, it looks like we're, in the current year, we budgeted 605. We're already at 829. I guess that would be with November's results in. So that's 8 months of the year and 4 months to go. Take back into account Sheena's comments that we're already going to be over $1 million. That's all good. Question I have, and again, we'll have to dig into these in a lot more detail as we go forward and work with Sheena and the other folks involved in crafting version 2 of this. But Sheena, you built into this a certain increase. What is it? And did you say 4% was an increase for the personnel costs?
For the personnel, yes. I've also got a 3%, 2%, and no raise and no additional employees numbers already set up. There is one department that really, well, every department needs additional in revenue pays. I'm getting, Harrington did a survey of all the towns and their employees, and we're nicely underpaid, but there is one department that is about 18% under comparable departments. And I figure if we can work with the 4%, then we can eventually take different departments and boost them a little.
That's a matter that I think we need to raise to the council to look at, what they think is fair. But it probably will accompany our suggestions for the budget and how we look at the overall numbers. Because if you look at the bottom line at the moment, I think we're well under water on this first draft, if I'm not mistaken. Let me shoot down to the very bottom here. The current,
150,000.
yeah, so it's basically just under 150,000. We would be in the red with the current numbers, right? So we have to take that into consideration as our top assessment of this.
But at a negative 150, Dave, is this the 4, 3, or 2% that we're
4%.
reviewing right now? This is the 4%. Okay.
That's 4%. So there's, obviously, when we go through this, especially with the first version of the budget every year, there's a balance between how well we can predict and estimate our income with what we think we should be spending versus expenses to get to essentially a break-even budget. That's always the goal, to get within a slight tolerance of break-even, because we don't expect to, show a profit when we, need to have the services that are required in the town, of course. But some of these assumptions here I'd like to take a look at today. For instance, we know that the transfer tax is up significantly this year. There's no doubt. And I did a quick thumbnail sketch, and based on the work that Gary had done in the analysis and what you just recapped, Bill, of about, was it 28 million in potential
Yes, sir.
transfer tax revenues out there? And assuming that not much of that is going to, well, we don't know how much of that will close in this fiscal year versus fiscal year 22. But that 28 million at 1.5% transfer tax to the town would yield about $420,000 in transfer tax. That's just what we can see on the horizon right now. So the 420, we could probably hazard a guess that, some portion of that will come in this fiscal year, and that a lot more of it will be in the following fiscal year. I don't know, with a normal 60 to 90-day window to close. But it's hard to tell how much of it, of that 420, would come in this fiscal year, and that's just going to put us further over on this year. For next year, Sheena, can you give us some idea of how you came up with the 750 number and who counseled that?
I went based on averages and knowing that most property does not close as instantly as we would like. Hoping that most of what is currently on the market would be closing next year. I personally don't know how much is still available for sale out of the Hyatt, but I know those go very nicely. And I just went, I took it just a little bit higher than the 5-year average, just to, inflation costs, values go up.
Right. Let me just put this out there. I think it may be worth the exercise, Bill. I like your feedback on this, for us to put together 2 versions of the budget, and maybe one with what we think is attainable based on our perception of the economy's situation and such, and these kinds of issues, but then one that represents sort of a more conservative view. And so at least then we've got a range that we can work with. And I don't want you to have to do twice the work, Sheena, but I think at least for some of these, if we can duplicate the whole spreadsheet and then be more conservative on, some of the buckets where we think we can't really see for sure what those numbers would be. And so we can get a view of what a baseline might be starting. Bill, what do you think?
So, I think what Gary had pointed out is an excellent way of us to look forward into the transfer tax. And what I mean by that is, if we can look back, Sheena, and look at how things were, where we had transfer tax by month, looking back, because I think there's an indication of when homes are going to sell in Dewey. I don't believe people are going to sell in June or July. I think most of the sales are going to happen post-season. And where does this sit with a $28 million market to where we sat last year? I don't know how the other committee members feel, but I think Dewey is maturing, right? And a lot of the shacks are being built up as multiple as homes, and I think it's less of an investment community and more of a residential community. And we need to look at the transfer tax of the next 2 or 3 years and see what's really going to happen, because there's people like myself who are not going to sell, and how much of these are become permanent homes versus investment homes. Just my thought process, Dave.
Yeah, there's some work that can be done in that area. Bill, I'd be happy to work with you and maybe Sheena together, that the 3 of us can take a run at that and see if we can get a look back that helps inform what we think may be coming, and get any more intel on how these numbers could be cast, right?
I can tell you this, based on the 5-year look back, June and September are the highest for sales, January and February for the lowest on average, but usually it's right about 50 to 60,000 over the past 5 years.
Can I just add something? Is a look back really going to reflect what's happening right now? And I've talked to some real estate agents who said that, ordinarily this time is slow, and especially between November and Christmas, but all rules are off the table right now. And I don't know. There are some extraordinary things happening right now, and I don't know how exactly a look back informs that. But I do think what Bill said about, we know this isn't going to continue to happen, that this is a sort of a moment that we're experiencing.
Right. let's do this. Bill, you and I and Sheena can have a separate conversation, see what we can do, at least to do a simple look at that. But I hear what Jill says, and I agree. I think with the economy being very unsure coming into 2021 and, the COVID situation lingering, at least until the vast majority of people are inoculated, I'll repeat my suggestion. I think we should do this budget, which is a pretty good starting point, but we should also do a conservative version, really just taking a few of the key revenue numbers and being very conservative with them and keeping maybe the 4% level of the expense side increase and see what it looks like with that. And Sheena, I don't know, it doesn't seem like it would be too onerous for you to do to just copy this spreadsheet and we give some different numbers for some of the revenues and see what the bottom line looks like. We already are 150 below water here, and that's not a good starting point, especially when we're predicting 750,000 in transfer tax to start with. So what do you guys think about doing that? Hopefully a simplified version, but just so we can get a feel for a base case versus this being, let's call this the optimistic case.
I think that's a good idea.
Sheena, can you comment on, because I'll just put it out there. I am for a 4% increase to our town in terms of the employee raise. I think that the prior years they've had 2% and 3%, and they've really put a lot of hard work and good work into this. And I think from your perspective, Dave, I think you need a 4% increase to the pay versus a 2% increase in pay. Sheena, what is that number in total?
Pay obligation. What did we say? It was,
Was it like $37,000 in total?
yeah, it's.
So I want the committee to know, in putting an increase to the town employees, it's not that much money. I just want for you guys to recognize that as you look at 4% versus 2%. So
Good. That's helpful.
Can I
The
just add?
37K wouldn't even get us back to close to net zero here on.
exactly.
Can I
So,
add one thing to that?
Hello. Yes, Jill.
We've had this discussion. I remember, Bill, didn't we have this discussion last year about salaries? And we brought in information about, or I brought in information about how the police salaries here are substantially lower than in other towns. And TJ had a conversation with me after that because some people thought that information was wrong and actually it was correct. So Sheena, the information you have from Harrington, I don't know if we can see that, but I would like to see that. So I agree about the 4%, and I'm not sure where certain departments fall as far as salary compared to other departments, but that 37,000 sounds like a certainly reasonable amount. And I do think that, this isn't the first time we've had this discussion, is what I'm trying to say. And I think it's an important one.
I think we have a lot of talent in town hall.
Yeah.
And we need to keep that talent in town hall.
Right.
And there are other communities that are recruiting. If you open up the newspaper, you can see all the jobs that are out there. And if we don't do what's best for our people, we're going to lose them. So,
just a point of question here. I know that there has been interviews for the new town manager position, and your meeting yesterday, did you guys have a milestone in that meeting around this, the short list of people? And can you see on the horizon a time frame for having a new town manager installed?
yes, we came to a conclusion, and we're hoping that person will start on February 1st.
Okay, so you're actually ready to propose an offer to someone and that kind of thing?
That is correct.
Okay, good. All right. Was that part of the public discussion, or is that in executive session?
An executive session.
Okay, very good. And you'll disclose that when it's available for public knowledge.
Yes,
So
sir.
you're hoping that that person will be on board by February 1st.
That is correct.
Okay, so, all right, that'll potentially impact this because, when they come in, we have to finalize the budget in March, right? So we'll have to take into their,
Their
Okay.
contemplated compensation is included in the budget.
okay, very good. Well, not so much just that, but they will then become involved in this process fairly late in the game. I think when that happened, when Scott came on board, he inherited a budget for the first year, and that's more or less, I guess, what will happen. But we should, expect that they'll have some thoughts and consideration of that. All right.
That's
let's go
why I
back-
feel like this committee's work is that important.
Yeah, I
Help
hear
them
you.
along.
I hear you. And,
happened
the
with
point
Scott.
here is we have to come up with a budget that we believe is attainable, but also fiscally responsible. And it's going to be a delicate balance here. If we thought that the following year with 2021 was going to be great guns for the economy, I think that would be one scenario. But I'm not so sure that we should assume that at this point, given the general economic conditions. Let's go back to the thing, and we have 475 that is predicted, which is consistent with this year's for the accommodations tax. And we've already brought in almost 440, and there's still the March part of that will come in. One of the things that I've thought of that we should probably bring up at some point in our discussion is whether the accommodations tax can be considered broken out on a quarterly versus a semi-annual basis. By making it in October and March, I think we lose a lot of visibility throughout the budgeting timeframe. So what do you guys think about that in talking further about that and possibly encourage, not obviously we can't do anything for this year, but in future years, I think it would help with the budgeting process. What do you think?
I would agree with that.
Whatever helps. I don't know how
Yeah.
hard it is on the other end to collect it and post it and all that, if it makes it harder for the people that do that. But I
Yeah.
would hope it would encourage people to send it more, maybe.
Yeah.
Well,
We should probably at
David, when I just want to make it, if you don't mind, I'll make a quick comment, and this is for Ashley. And I think, one of the things that I've been a proponent of is a form of audit or a form of certification, which is sending letters out to each homeowner and have them basically sign, whether it's 0 or 10,000 or 20,000, and sign and send it back, because I think it keeps people honest. And we haven't done that, Ashley, in 3 years. So we used to have that process. Is that correct?
We used to have the process, and then we were told that we had to stop by legal counsel about 4 years ago, with a new law that was put into place. I don't recall off the top of my head what that law was, but I did tell Sheena yesterday. I will find out this week. I'll reach out to our town council and then as well as the other municipalities that used to do it, to find out exactly what it was and to see if there's any way that maybe we can reword that form to make it so we would be permitted to obtain information.
Yeah, if you can, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can get back to you as soon as I have that
So
information.
Bill, if I understand correctly, you're saying send out a solicitation to the property owners, asking them for an approximate number of what they expect their rent to be across the year?
To almost certify that either they had no rental income
Mhm.
or what the rental income was.
Bill, if I can clarify, it was what we used to send out that we had to stop was if they did not rent their property, they had to sign a form saying, I do not rent. So we might be okay to send out a form if they do rent, asking what they're expecting or something like that. I just know that we were forced to stop the paper that people were required to put that they do not rent.
Yeah. that's
Well, let's
true.
figure out legally why
Okay.
we had to stop and see. I just, look, we're all human. And I have, there's people in my community and I'm not trying to go after them, but if you rent it for a week here or a week there, what does it really mean? But everybody should be paying their dues.
We
My
had
mind.
a discussion last month You're a
Yeah.
month late and $1 short, Bill.
I'm always $1 short. My nickname in high school was Dollar Bill.
I know. Okay, so dollar bill. Anyway, one of the big things is the real estate agencies that manage the properties. You know, then it's not the homeowner; it's these real estate agencies. Because we had talked about some things, but as Dave pointed out, you know, a lot of rentals go through real estate agencies. So
Yeah, the other part of that is, I think we did say in one of maybe the last meeting that I would reach out to Jim on this issue of, we apparently before COVID hit, there was an allocation of an external resource that we were going to have access to help dig into this, the rental and the accommodations issue. And we lost that thread when COVID hit. Let me, again, remind myself to go back and talk to Jim about that resource and whether we can resurrect that process, because what we're talking about is not just validating, but estimating the amount of accommodations tax we can expect. And that is important that we try to get visibility on that as best we can. So leave it at that.
Can I say one final thing about this? If Ashley's checking about forms that other towns use, what systems are in place in other towns as far as accommodation taxes? I mean,
About that, when I can send out an email to all of their municipal clerks.
yeah, that'd be great.
Questions specifically that each of you have that you'd like me to include that email, if you can get them to me by, I'd say maybe like the end of the weekend, I can wait till Monday morning first thing and send out an email to each of the municipalities.
I think that would be great to collect some information because, somebody might have a great system. So,
Hey, Dave,
Yes.
if I could interject something here. There was a local law firm over the last couple of weeks that sponsored a online webinar with a couple of companies that do work in this area. And I know there were representatives from various areas along the shore, but there were also some from other areas as well. But basically what they do is they kind of do a map, kind of an overview of the rental properties that are available through Airbnb and some of the other outlets. And I think it would not be so helpful to us because we know for the most part who the renters are, or who rents their property, but we don't know who we're missing. And so both David Jasinski and I were on the call, and we had talked about following up with one of these companies to find out more about whether or not they could do anything. So that's just another possible resource. And I know Scott Koenig in the past had talked with one of these companies, didn't get a lot of good information, but maybe there's, a need to revisit with some of these companies and see if there's something there. So I just want to let you know about that as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. And yeah, I was just it came to mind what Scott had been through a couple of years ago on this, where he had been working with a company. And I think when it came down to it, they weren't capturing enough of the net of people to make it financially viable. But maybe that's changed, or maybe this is a different company that has a better way of going about it. So please keep us informed as you and David look further into that, if you would.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Keep on with the revenue streams. The last two buckets are the cable TV and the beach concession rather, and those are stable at the same amounts as this year. I don't think there's any reason in particular to think about changing that at the moment. Let me go down a little bit here. We've got licenses, which is something that I have some questions about. It seems that we are exceedingly low on our license revenue here. And I know that the business licenses in general come in late in our fiscal year. Is that correct, Sheena?
Yeah, and that's something Scott and I talked about, that it makes it very difficult to accurately budget and analyze with it coming in at the last minute. And one year maybe convince the commissioners, Gary and Bill, to extend the license for like a 13-month period so that they're not due until April or May, so that we can get our revenue at the beginning of the year instead of at the end. Because it makes it really hard to know what's happening.
That's a creative and good way of
Good idea.
solving that problem, isn't it? Yeah.
Are we talking business licenses
Yes.
for construction type things or restaurant? What kind of business license?
Well,
All commercial business licenses, all commercial rental, all residential rental.
So one thing Scott had mentioned before is that the rental licenses might be down, for instance, because of everything, the uncertainty of everything that was going on. And, people, for instance, I didn't rent, so I didn't get a rental license, but things that changed, for people that usually do these things. So I think he predicted that happening. But along the lines of the building permit thing and the licensing, getting a license in town, it would be interesting to see if the construction that's happening in town right now, if there was a way to snapshot, do people have permits and do the people doing the work have building licenses?
They cannot get their building permit if they do not have a building license, business license.
Right. We're assuming that they all have permits.
Right. But we don't know. Let me back to your original comment, Jill. On the accommodations, the rentals for the residential, we're 63.5 of 103, which means we're way below on the house rentals. And yet we took in almost the full amount, if not more, of the accommodations tax. So something's out of kilter there, at least if I'm looking at that correctly. We're way below on the rental licenses, but we're going to capture the right amount or maybe more of the accommodations tax. So I can't really figure that one out.
Dave, those business license, those rental licenses and business licenses are fiscal year 22. What we've already captured was the end of fiscal year 21.
Okay.
So that's why I'm saying we need to extend it so that they come due in the accurate fiscal year.
Dave,
Okay. I got you. That makes sense.
Okay.
What would it take for us to be able to do what you suggested? And can we be, since the majority of those will be coming in the next 3 or 4 months, I guess we have enough time to adjust that for the coming year and get on that new schedule. Who would have to get involved in that? Does that involve the town solicitor as well as, I guess, Jim and moving it up to council?
Ashley, since she's organizes all that, Ashley would have to get with Jim and the commissioners about change and with council about moving it, if we can move it to, for this next year, or if we have to wait another year.
Dave,
Go ahead, Ashley.
the commercial business licenses expire on February 28th annually. The due date for commercial business licenses is March 1st. And for residential rental licenses, they're due on April 1st. So generally we get a lot of the residential licenses in March, and just depending how late into that month we receive them, they'll get applied to either the fiscal year that we're currently in or pushed to the next one, depending on what the person, which being Sheena in accounting, feels is necessary. But
if I rented my house during the summer of 2020, when is my payment due to the town for my accommodation tax?
3/31 for accommodation tax. I'm sorry. The accommodation tax in the fall is due October 15th, and that would be the rentals that you had through the summer. And
Correct.
then accommodation tax that you have in the winter is due April 15th.
Okay.
That's what Dave talked about, changing to quarterly, right? Or no?
I'm sorry.
Dave, is that what you were talking about, changing to quarterly?
No, I was talking about changing the schedule for payment of the accommodations tax to quarterly.
Payment
Not
in
the-
from the
Not
homeowners?
the- What's that?
Payment from the homeowners, right?
Well, yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
to get more visibility on it. But back on the licensing thing. So let me just bring it back to the numbers here. We've got 63.5 of 103 budgeted for the residential licenses. And we think that the remainder of that would come in before the end of the fiscal year because that's due on April 1st, correct, Ashley?
Correct.
Okay, so that's probably okay.
They get mailed out, they'll be mailed out in February to all commercial and residential. And then dates are on there, so each of the entities know they have to have that payment back in by.
And so we're just projecting a modest increase of the budget for the coming year from 103.5 to 105,000, and that doesn't seem like it's too far out of likelihood, right? On the commercial business licenses where we've collected 68.5 of 227,000 though, that's quite a big difference there.
They come in February. See, that's what I was saying. All the business and the rental licenses all come in at the end of the fiscal year. So it looks like you're losing money until at the last minute. So if we did push it where it came in, it was due after the fiscal year started, then you'd have a better idea of your funds throughout the entire year.
Right.
We did lose the Lighthouse and Cape Hassa and a few other of the commercial in that area.
Yeah, and if I look back at April 19 to March 20, which is the most recent completed year, we were at 189 roughly. So I'm wondering if 230, an increase on that is still warranted. Is there any way to get any better intel, Sheena, on what we're likely to finish at for this year?
I can base it on what we've done in the past. Rental licenses in February and March average about 50,000, and your commercial business licenses average about 155,000
Each month?
That's good.
February and March.
Each month. So that's across February and March, or each month they average?
Between the two.
Between 155,000, you said. So if we take 155 and we add it to the 68, we're right about on target, right?
Yep.
Okay, all right. All right, anything else on the rental license buckets? All right, let's go down to parking. And overall, it looks like
Is that a lot of delinquent parking tickets, or is that just me?
Parking. I didn't think we were down on delinquent parking.
Or wait, where's the? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Never mind. I was
Yep.
looking at the wrong column.
So we're 986 on a budget of 119, which we're not going to make up probably that much of a difference.
No, most of that loss is due to not having parking enforcement.
No, I was looking at the wrong column. I saw a different number. Sorry.
Okay.
Because without the enforcement, people figured out that the meters were down. Now the quarters stayed about the same, but the Park Mobile usage went down.
Plus, we lost some revenue probably in the early part of the season with the restriction of the town.
I mean, on the other hand, we wanted people to come into the town to go get food and all that sort of thing. So it was sort of a.
Our seasonal parking permits for owners was higher than we projected.
Well, there were a lot.
One of the things I just want to comment, you know, for those of us that go to the beach, that live here, this was a very busy year.
Very.
I think that the town assumed that there would be a reduction in people coming to enjoy the beach.
Uh-huh.
but that didn't happen. The beaches were busy all year long. So I think it's kind of a reminder for next year that we need to have code enforcement in place, just as a comment.
Well, and here's your seasonal parking permits assumptions that have been used by Sheena to build in, right?
Yes.
So there you have it.
Yep.
Okay.
What a great feature, Sheena.
Thank you for telling me that. You saved me a lot of work.
So can we get a copy of this in a spreadsheet, or when you do the, instead of a PDF is what I was going to say.
You want my spreadsheet? You're killing me.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's just easier to play around with it when it's in a spreadsheet. I don't have to
Bill,
do it in a
Bill,
spreadsheet.
tell her about my spreadsheet.
It is incredibly detailed, or she has done an incredible job. Sheena and Ashley deserve 4%. I'm just throwing it out there. Whatever happens, they deserve. No, Sheena's done an incredible job of the finance and the budget side.
There's probably about 10 different sheets to the workbook.
I got it. I do that all day long. So yeah, I know. It's horrifying.
All right, let's move on to fines. We've got, this is where it's, always hard to predict. We've got a total of 156,000 out of a 347,000 budget. And that's been lowered a little bit, but still. So on the fine side, any guidance on that, Sheena?
It all goes back to enforcement. The parking tickets goes back to enforcement, and the town fines is what the tickets that the officers write. Now, if people are behaving when they're in town, then those fines are going to be down.
Well, also, doesn't it have to do with, I don't know, is those all fines for parking?
The parking tickets is strictly parking.
Uh-huh.
The town fines are drunken, disorderly. I'm sure there's some indecent in there. Just anything that goes against our ordinances. The traffic fines under that are your speeding in town and things like that.
But I would think, we had reduced hours and indoor, gatherings and all that sort of stuff that I would think would affect this.
There was still quite a few drunken disorderlies. Based on, I just know the
There
fine.
could have been a whole lot more. I mean, I guess it's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a yin yang here.
How do you define disorderly? I understand drunk, but how do you define disorderly?
Oh, come on, dollar bill.
Hey,
That's
Dave,
back to you, Dave.
Urinating.
But it's the parking fines that represent the largest drop off here. And I think it's fair to say that we are hoping, and we have no reason to believe that the summer of 2021 is going to be as hampered as 2020 was. And therefore, we should once again have code enforcement and those numbers be back up to hopefully a more reasonable level. Any other comments on that?
Dave, I mean, that was just really my comments. It looks like there's some assumption going forward that code enforcement is going to be down for the next year. But if we can get the COVID effects substantially out of the way by, late May, June, July, hopefully.
Right.
And, there's a reason to have code enforcement at that point. People will be here. We can support it. We made a conscious decision, I think, to save money wherever we could.
Yeah.
Code enforcement was the place where we were able to reduce personnel. But what didn't happen was we didn't get the cross training that we expected of the seasonal police officers to actually do some of the code enforcement activity that the code enforcement people would normally do.
It seems under the circumstances, everybody did a great job predicting the best they could what was going to happen. And there were a lot of unknown factors in all of this that.
Yeah, Jill, I agree with you, but I think that one of the things you need to learn from past behaviors. And I think one of the things that as a town, we need to make sure that we have code enforcement people in place. That it's, to save budgetarily on, 40,000, we're going to lose 200,000 in terms of potential revenue.
Mm.
So just as a guideline, as you look past, learn from the past, move forward on it. I think not putting code enforcement was not rebuilding our code enforcement crew hurt us financially.
But there's two different aspects of this, and I think Gary hit on something very important here. First of all, there's no reason at the moment, and granted, we're just talking this point in time, to believe that the summer of 2021 is going to be as hampered as 2020 was in terms of the ability to have code enforcement folks. That's the first part. The second, though, that I heard Gary say that I was unaware of is that there was supposed to be some cross-training with the seasonal police that didn't necessarily take hold properly. And I'm wondering if that's anything that we can do, that we can assist in getting something moving in that direction again, just in case we end up with some constraint on the 2021 season. How would we go about starting a process or promoting the process to make that happen?
Was that directed at me?
Yeah, whoever has, I mean, Gary, if you have, yeah, by all means.
Well, it was something we talked about, and every time it was brought up, the response was, well, it's really difficult. They have to have the little computer assisted equipment to issue the tickets, and we need this extra training that has to be done for the police. And yeah, I admit this, it's extra training certainly. It can't possibly be that difficult, at least in my view, but maybe I'm wrong. But it's, I think it's a discussion worth having. What are the contingency plans? If in fact we do have to find some ways of cutting back personnel expenditures, are there some ways of filling in the gap that we're not able to take advantage of during this past year, so that we wouldn't face that same loss of revenue from parking fines? Because parking has generally been, and we were looking at it as being our top source of revenue. Now that's obviously been outweighed by transfer tax because of the crazy things that are going on in the real estate market. But parking is a really important source of income for the town.
It is. Well put, Gary. And I think I like the way you put that in terms of this being our fallback or our plan B in the event that something does happen and our code enforcement is restricted. We do have enough time if we're able to bring this forward through the commissioners and to the police about the cross-training taking place as part of bringing on the seasonal police, right? We do have that ability at this moment.
I'm thinking so. I mean, I think it's at least an open question that needs to be discussed.
Okay, let's make a note of that and we'll bring it forward to discuss with the commissioners. I think we still have a little bit of time before we'd have to act on that to prepare for when the seasonal police come on in the spring in order to make that a possibility. And it could be just considered at this moment, a plan B if something happens with code enforcement, that we then have a way of recouping that revenue stream that we lost last year. I think it's smart for us to at least address that issue. Okay. All right, let's move on and complete the rest of the revenue side. We have the miscellaneous and other, which is a variety of things. I think there's a significant increase here of about $60,000. And that comes largely from the 100,000, or at least 100 of it comes from what we call donations. And Bill, I think there was a note in there about your suggestion for that. Why don't you give us?
Yeah. So let me talk to that. I think that we have a strong town. I think people love being here, love living here. We don't have a property tax. And Gina and I were going through and talking about the budget, and I would like us to try to, as a town, develop a campaign to ask for donations in town from residents, where it's a charitable donation. It is charitable where they can assign it to a police department. They can assign it to the beach. They can assign it to various restricted funds. And what sparked this idea, Dave, real clearly was the fact that we donated to Dewey Goes Pink. and which is, held by the owner of Starbird, Steve Montgomery, and seeing that he was able to raise $66,000, even though there wasn't a race. And I think with the communication to the town and saying, we would like, we're asking for donations from the town. And I don't think we're not a tax, it's donations. And I think that as I've spoken to numerous homeowners, there are a lot of people willing to write a check in support of our community. And not saying it's a tax, it's a donation. And what I asked for us to put on the budget is at least an attempt for this year to reach out to the community and see what we can get. So that's what that 100,000 represents.
Did you run any numbers about number of property owners and amount that they would need to contribute in order to come up with that 100,000?
It was looking at the fact of an average donation of $100 on 1,000 of the 1,700 homes. Where some people might write a check for $1,000 and some might write a check for $25. Not judging, but that was how
we would couch this as something that could be dedicated. Well, I guess it could get complicated if we were trying to direct it to a particular function of managing and administering that. But if we said it's for town services, since we don't have a property tax, that would
Correct.
be, catch all. Will it be?
Yeah, I mean,
to make sure it was tax deductible, right?
correct. It would be, it is, I look at right now as I have in my community, which is Bayside Court, we have 20 townhomes, and those 20 townhomes contribute $400 or $450 a year for general services. And that's the only fee I pay to live in this beautiful town of Dewey.
So I just want to add one thing. I think that's a great idea, and the tax part of it is great. I forget the wording that you just used, Dave, about town services, but last month Zeke brought up a different idea about town services, where I think the donations is a great idea and it should be there, but also at some point in the future, the potential of, $150 per household for town services. That's not a donation. And so if you say town services for donations, I just want to be careful about how we word it. That's all.
Yeah, understood. And we need to carry that forward when we get back on our discussion of new revenue sources for the town, because that's an important, potential source for us. We've all, and the more time you've been here, the more time we've heard these words. We have to find more stable and predictable revenue sources for the town and can't rely on the good nature of transfer tax to carry us for much longer, right?
All right.
So those kinds of things that could bring in significant funds, that we'll get back on that maybe next meeting. What I'd like to suggest we do, and that pretty much I think carries us through, let's do the investments just for the last piece and the miscellaneous stuff. Dewey Beach Enterprises is down to, come April of this coming year, is down to just the 37.5 as far as any future revenues coming from DBE. Is that correct, Sheena?
Yes, because it is now recognized, the 5,000 a month is now recognized on the balance sheet. So
Okay.
It's not revenue that we can get.
Right. Still comes in as a financial item, but not here.
Right.
So Dave, just as a comment, is that we were able to successfully get the town and Luft Associates to look at our financial statements as full accrual, not modified accrual. So the prior statements were more of a cash flow statement, where now when the income is earned or expenses incurred are actually in the period. So it is true financial statements from a fiscal perspective, and therefore the Dewey Beach receivables is back in the years in which that revenue was incurred.
Got it.
Okay.
So our overall revenues here are projected to be 3.658 million versus 3.7 for this year. And so we are predicting a slight decrease in overall revenues. I don't want to try to take the time in the meeting today to go through the expenses in the same level of detail we have on the revenue streams. But I would encourage each of you to look at the expenses with the understanding that there's the 4% increase in personnel expense built into most of the buckets. And that is substantially the reason for the higher numbers on the expense side. So let's table that for the moment and see if we can move the meeting forward here. Sheena, if I can summarize, we're going to look at a few specific things and areas and have side conversations going forward with Jim and with others about some of these items on the revenue side. But if you would share the actual spreadsheet with me, and I'll share it with Jill and anyone else who wants to at least see a copy of it for the point in time in the snapshot. I would like to see us take that approach of coming up with a more austere version of this, given that we're already 150 underwater in this current initial version, and we know we're going to have to somehow at least get that much back. Based on what I've heard in the revenue side of things that we've discussed so far today, doesn't seem to me to be anything particularly out of kilter. We should get some of the fines back that we didn't get this past year. And we hope that those numbers with a little thinking and analysis on the transfer tax could be achievable, although it does seem a little bit high. But I think we're in the ballpark on the revenue side, and it'll be up to us to figure out how to get back into, a zero-based budget for the expense side of things. So let's do that and see if we can come up with something that shows a more conservative overall picture of this, and see where it takes us from there. Anybody else have any comments?
And so the commercial licensing, that part I was a little bit fuzzy about. So are we predicting, because there was a gap there, right?
Commercial licenses, yes.
And it was about 150, wasn't it?
We go back up.
The commercial licenses should come by the end of this fiscal year, should come right in on schedule, on budget.
They're due by February 28th.
So yeah, but my point was, if we were starting 150 down, wouldn't that make it?
They will come in at the end of next year also. See, that's the thing with the way it's set up, it comes in at the end. So you have to just hope and pray.
So, one thing is running this town, I think, from a budget and finance, this at Dave, I think you guys should, as a committee, review the fee schedule in terms of what is being charged and how it's being charged, and assess whether those, what I love about this team is the fact that we're looking at what generates those numbers. You're looking at the metrics, and part of that metric is looking at a fee schedule. And I think that's important for you guys to know how those numbers are being generated, Jill.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, what is an in-town business of less than 5 versus more than 5 pay? What does a restaurant or a hotel pay? And I don't know that that's been shared with this committee.
I think the last time we looked at fee schedules was a couple of years ago, and we said we should revisit it every couple of years. So maybe that is a good thing for us to do. Let's plan to put that into the agenda for the next meeting. And Sheena, I'll talk to you about, getting, or perhaps that's Ashley's bailiwick, about getting a list of what the, the numbers are and when they were last increased, that kind of thing. Okay. Very good point. All right, instead of going through the expense numbers in detail, if you have any questions after going back and reviewing these, send them to me and I'll share them with the group. Again, we can't do reply alls for emails. We have to just do individual, and I'll act as the hub for the communication for that. I'd like to postpone our continued discussion about new revenue streams until next meeting and get back on that. In the meantime, does anybody have any other comments or business that they'd like to bring up today?
Well, if we're going to consider new revenue streams, if we could get a list of those fees that people and businesses are paying, that would be helpful in case that's something we want to consider.
Right.
So Sheena, can you send that to Dave for him to populate? Okay.
Yep, we'll get that on the next agenda and be able to review that. Probably too late to do well, we'll see if it's too late to do anything for this year. If we get it early enough in January, maybe there's still a chance that we can get it into the coming year's budget, right? Yeah. Okay, let's do that. And let's make sure that that's a focal point of the next meeting agenda in early January. Any other business anyone would like to bring up or propose today? Okay. If there's no other business, I'd like a motion to wrap up and adjourn the meeting, please.
Motion to adjourn?